In my last video, I went in a somewhat in-depth look into today and tomorrow's severe weather setup, but right now I'm going to do a quick little overview and talk about what's changed. So, looking here, here's our day one. We have at a 5% tornado risk here. Wind and hail. Hail is not even in the picture here at all. A little bit tomorrow. This is our tomorrow's risk. A lot less severe, it looks like, as well as a 2% tornado, pretty wide, and then mainly just wind damage being that threat there. Whoops, car there. We'll look over our synoptic pattern, what's changed. You can see still see this very deep digging trough here, which will become negatively tilted as the day goes on tomorrow. And again, lots of warm, moist convection, at least at the surface, but aloft, it's also there, which is the only thing, right? So the temperatures aloft aren't really, they've gotten a little bit colder, which is important. So something I failed to do in my last video was look a little bit at today's setup and in our region here. We have lots of divergence aloft, which could really help to fuel some thunderstorms. It looks like our moisture is looking a little better than it was yesterday. You can see 50s are way pretty deep in here. Almost they're just reaching that New Mexico border. They're really succeeding right now. Here's our current. That's our surface obs at 9Z today. So the moisture was already infecting its way into the region pretty well. I can even take our initialization right now at 15Z, and you can see very similar thing. Already pretty unstable. Like looks like the capping version's still there, but you're building a lot of instability underneath that capping inversion. So it is important to keep in mind for today's setup. Cape, again, MU Cape, we're looking at the wrap model here now, and there is definitely this plume of Cape that keeps happening for the next 2 days down here. This model is struggling a little bit to go further right now, but as of today, this is kind of also an area of interest too. SPC hasn't put anything out for that quite yet. Main risk area being in there. You can see here, let me look at the cam. Let's take the 12Z HRRR here. Reflectivity, mainly just a bunch of thunderstorms blowing up. Possible little line segments just like this. This is probably our main real worry right here. These storms out here could be interesting. So it depends on how they'll form really. You can take a wrap sounding out here just to see how that looks. I'll go back to the HRRR again though, but lots of thunderstorms out here, and eventually once they become strong enough downdrafts, they could pose that tornado QLCS style threat. I also have a lot of other soundings from earlier, but here's this sounding from down here. Let me actually delete these, but here's that sounding from down there, and you can see lots more cape here. Like the wrap is really liking this look. Very very quick LCLs. Photograph isn't amazing, but definitely lots more cape here, so that could be interesting if they're able to pick up any couplets. Just not very strong flow, as you can see here. Possibly some mini supercells, but something to look out for. See theta E versus pressure, lots of instability in those levels. NAM NST should do something similar. Again, there's lots of storms, and then into tomorrow, that's where that QLCS threat comes in. I think it's sounding out ahead of this line as well. And then one other thing I believe I talked about, but not for a very long period of time, was the threat for somewhat cold core setup, cold core style storms ahead. So kind of on the northern side of this low. Let's see. The best way to see this was surface vorticity and 3 cape. Right there on that back side there. Lots of surface vorticity and lots of 3 cape kind of remaining there. Cape is, I'm just gonna get right in that bullseye right there. Right here in that bullseye. Cape is very fine to the lower levels. Here's our sounding ahead of that line on Monday. You can see much larger curvature, but also quicker moving storms. That's gonna be interesting to keep paying attention to, but that's a very somewhat scary photograph just because of how large that low level shear is, but kind of depends on the system again, so keep an eye out on it while the storms are ongoing. Here's those storms at a little bit of a bullseye. You can see storm relative photograph. It's somewhat curved here. Just looking at it straight on, it's just directional, but in relation to the storms, if you need a right mover, that would have some curvature to it. Not to mention quite a bit of cape right at the lower levels, completely unstable. 3 cape at 162. SRH is struggling, but again, sometimes it's just that surface vorticity and 3 cape coupling together to get your tornadoes. You can see the STP is somewhat elevated right in there. And as I was saying for Sunday, early on today, definitely that threat of some storms out here ahead of the line, which is interesting to keep in mind. And then as the line forms out here, that's where your real tornado threat comes from. Your wind damage and tornado threat is out here. But for more isolated stuff, I would keep an eye out for here. More unstable out there. Temperatures are higher. almost complete relative humidity here. You can see very moist air mass right there. And that will be interesting to keep in mind. So we'll pay attention to that. But already we have quite a bit of moisture infection. Look at our initialization for 15C again. Dew points are already in the 50s out here in Texas, nearing the 60s, pretty far west. That is something to keep in mind. Otherwise, the setup looks mainly on track for, as we said earlier, struggling with a little bit of moisture, but it looks like we're getting a lot more infection now. Here's 700 millibars. Remember my last video was very dry out here. Let's look at 500, actually 850 dew points here. You can see a lot more moisture has kind of mixed into the western areas, so storms might not have to deal with more dry air as much here. Definitely still warm temperature infections there at the. Also, colder aloft is important. You see some of that colder air has moved its way over Texas. Otherwise, that's my recap. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.